Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started. People might still be joining. We are recording this, and as always, we will send out the recording link and the slides following the meeting. So if you aren't able to listen to the whole thing, or for those that didn't make it at all, or if you just want a review of what we share, we will be sending all of this out. Okay. As always, if you can just please keep yourself muted, and use the hand raising function or chat if you have questions. And then we did email out the agenda. So these are the items that we will be going over today. And our first item is going to be from Kristen about the LEAS requests. So Kristen, are you here?
I am.
Okay.
And I am all about money today. So you can go to the next slide. LEAS requests for licenses are due tomorrow by 5 o'clock to guarantee funding from the educator salary adjustment. The educators must have a cleared background and have done the ethics review within 1 year. That is the biggest reason the educator does not get one, is because they have not done ethics. The educator funding for a full-time person with a qualifying assignment is $8,400 this year. We are at this point still emailing LEAs if something is wrong, but as we get closer, we may not have time to do that. The other thing is, if you are renewing a LEA specific license, like you got the educator one in 2020 and you're redoing it, they must be marked on that tab as reason for authorization is LEAS renewal, and you must verify that the educator has 60 points on the renewal form. Those renewal forms will be audited just like every other renewal form, with 10% being audited. So yeah, keep a track, tell your educators to keep track of them, and they are due tomorrow by 5 o'clock. Next slide. This is the kindergarten type problem. This was a problem, and it's partly our fault. In the past, kindergartners only got paid 55% of the WPU. Didn't matter if they were in all-day kindergarten or half-day kindergarten. Last year, as you know, the legislature gave us funding to start doing all-day kindergarten. We estimated at that point about 75% of students, or 70% of students, would be in full-day kindergarten. Based on what we got on October 1, only 50% of students were enrolled in full-day kindergarten. We know this was not correct. We have some LEAs that didn't mark what type of kindergartner class the kid was in, if he was full day or half day. We had some LEAs who've had full day kindergarten for years mark students as half day. The BAs were sent a survey to update the information, and that's due Monday. We have sent them counts, and I believe Callista sent out the information today to everyone on this email also. You cannot change the number of kindergartners. You can just change the kindergarten type. A kindergarten who is not marked with a full day or half day code will be considered half day. So this will cost you the LEA's money. Right now, if we stay at 50%, that's $19 million the legislature may pull away from us. So if you have students kindergartners who should be marked full day, please work with your BAs to get this right. So we have some big districts that didn't do it right too. So we need to have this correct. Next year, it'll be a fatal error if you don't have the kindergarten type marked as of October 1. Are there any questions? Have I scared you enough? Yes. The question was, if a student is in a full day program but only attending half day, they should be marked as NN, not FN, because they're only doing partial day? Really good question. Any other questions?
Kristen, this is Sharon Rayo. I have a question. So
Okay.
in Aspire, everybody is considered NN. We don't go and mark that unless we go in and put FN. So I think ours is really good. We did good with it. My question is, maybe it's an Aspire question. Can we make the default for next year FN? Because we have maybe 60 kids in our whole district that are half day. So it's a lot of work on secretaries to go and create that special program, put them in.
Yes, I would suggest that you talk to Paula about that.
Okay,
And
okay.
make it the
Reverse that. Okay.
the reverse, yeah. And I was just gonna check. I don't think you were Uinta was, nope, you looked very good. So
We worked really hard.
all
right, thank you.
Want your money. How's that?
Thank you. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions? It gets there's a question from Millard about if it's in Cactus or if it's at the course level. It is not. It is in student enrollment data. And Callista is going to go over that. But right now, if it's not right in your SIS system, but when you know what the kids are in a full day or half day, just work with your BAs to get this information in correctly. Any other questions? All right. And you can email me or Callista if you have questions about what you turned in. It was sent out, or we're hoping it will be sent out, but it was sent out to the BAs. So, right. Next is Callista. We'll tell you about how to do it.
Thanks, Kristen. Okay, so I am going to be talking a little bit about our last UTREC submission for October 1. Kristen already talked a little bit about the kindergarten issue, and that's one of the things I will talk about. But first, I just wanted to say thank you from all teams at USBE to all LEAs. We really appreciate all the hard work. We know it's a lot of work. From every LEA and all the UTREC's people that work to make this data accurate and to get it turned in on time. We really appreciate you. And I just also wanted to personally say we really appreciated all the great communication when we needed to contact an LEA. Everyone was really responsive, and that makes our job so much easier. So thank you. We generally give this feedback every year just to give you guys an idea of how it went. So this year, the deadline for our October 1 submission was on Tuesday, October 10th. That was because the normal deadline of the 7th fell on a weekend, and then that following Monday was a holiday. All LEAs were able to finalize on that day with the exception of 2, and they did get extensions due to having pretty big SIS problems. Though even with those extensions, though, we had all LEAs finalized by Monday, October 16th. And so at that point, the reason we share this with you is because once the data is all final from every LEA, there's a lot of processes that have to happen at the state. And so the data is not just usable starting the next day. So we run what we call an ETL process to get the data from the UTREC's finalized database into our various tables that we can actually use. So that was run on the following day, the 17th, and then our data and statistics team did an audit of that, and we finished that on the 20th. The ETL to get all of the data after it was audited into production happened just this week on Monday. So it does take a little while for us to get that data to a final state. Right now, the October 1 counts are in the process of being presented to the CDC by our finance team, and we'll be running calculations for funding purposes. After that, all October 1 enrollment data will be available for internal and public use, and we will put up the official enrollment reports for this school year as of October 1 on our website. Okay, so Kristen already talked about this, so I'll try not to repeat everything she said. The reason that I'm including it here as well is because this was a specific problem with this submission. It is also a little bit expected because it's the very first time that we had to use the kindergarten type data for the purpose of funding kindergarten in two different ways, for full day and half day. So of course we learn as we go, and we learned that unless we make it a fatal error, it doesn't get reported by everyone in October. So I will be talking about that on the next slide, that next submission, December, it will be fatal. And then for sure by year end, it's always been fatal. And then next October, it will be fatal. So just keep that in mind, that data does need to be entered at the beginning of the year. The two codes that we have are half day and full day. So I know that might look different what your SIS defaults to, and it seems like Aspire is going to change that next year to make it easier for you. So just make sure that the students that need to be reported as full day are being reported that way, and it's huge funding implications. So that's the reason that this is so important. We also do need codes for all kindergarten students. We can't have blanks. And so not only do we need it for everyone, it needs to be accurate. Okay, so the problem was when we audited the data, we just found that there were over 9,000 kindergartners left with a blank code, which equates to a lot of money. So we had to send out a Qualtrics data collection survey to all LEAs, which I believe was sent out yesterday afternoon. This was sent to the business administrators because it's directly related to finance, but we know that the UTREX people can help in verifying that data. So you may already be aware of this, but if not, just know that your BAs were sent this and are expected to give a response. We're asking that you review the kindergarten type codes that were finalized in UTREX for October 1. And then also that you review your current data in UTREX, because we want to get that entered if they're blank or corrected now, so that by December, those will be accurate, and also for the purpose of avoiding fatal errors. So the validation on that is, it is on the student record, the S1.347 validation. This only checks if the kindergarten type code field is left blank. So it doesn't check the accuracy of what you're submitting. If you put in a student as full day and they should have been half day, this only checks if it's left blank. So please do both, check your blanks and also check that the full day and half day codes are being reported accurately. Okay, any questions on the kindergarten stuff? I know we've hit that pretty hard, but it is really important. And you can reach out to myself and Kristen if you want further clarification on that. We're not asking that you change the total, that's final. So the kindergarten count itself is not changing. We're just asking that you review the breakdown of those full day and half day codes. All right. So other things that we learned from this particular submission, this is sort of a reoccurring problem we've also had in past years, but the October school summary report we found pretty early was the current year was correct, but the prior year data was showing the prior year, so it just didn't get updated. So this has been fixed, even though I know it's after the fact, but just reporting back to you that that should be fixed now. The year-end archived reports back from July and the current October 1 archive reports will be available soon. IT is working on both of those, which is just another reason and plug for you to please download your reports when you finalize. That way you don't have to rely on waiting for the archived reports. In addition to downloading your UTREX reports at the time that you finalize, it's very useful. We found if you also download a copy of your examine file, that can be found on the UTREX overview under the level 1 errors and warnings. It's just really useful to have as a copy of what you finalized, and it can be really helpful in the event that there's an audit or you find a major issue and later on need to get that updated by us. The examine file can be a great tool. And then just a reminder to please not pause submissions after finalizing in October and December. That's just shouldn't be happening. If you have paused your submissions because you're having major problems, like with your SIS, please contact the UTREX help, put a ticket in. Otherwise, it is required in board rule that you submit daily, and we've just been noticing that there have been LEAs pausing submissions. So just a reminder to please continue to submit daily even after you finalize. And then here is just an explicit reminder on those daily submissions. We do see this every year, but when we start to look at the data in preparation for October 1, so after UTREX has rolled over in September, we do notice that LEAs are probably still working on getting things set up, but just a reminder to make sure as soon as you can to submit daily and set up a scheduled collection. That way we don't have to email and remind you. And if it's scheduled, then you don't have to worry about it and think about it. It's just automatically sending data to us daily. Please make sure that you collect and submit data daily to UTREX, because it does help us to review your data and it can make things a lot smoother when there are issues that we find. We can catch and fix things earlier than instead of, if we get down to the last day, and then it becomes a lot more stressful for everyone. Also, another reason for submitting data daily is because we use the data in UTREX for purposes that require current and accurate data, such as assessment rostering. That was a really big deal this year, where if there's not data in UTREX that's recent, it really affects those assessment rosters. Okay, any questions related to the October 1 finalized submission or comments?
There's one in the chat from Stacy.
Oh, okay.
Responded.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Stacy. Okay. Okay, I will turn the time over to Riley.
I'll be talking about the SOAR report update. And just to share the expected timeline for the SOAR reports. So the SOAR report uses data from the October 1 school year 2024. count and the assessment data from the prior year for school year 2023. So we are waiting on cohort 2023 graduation data and the December load of ACT data to be complete, and then we'll run the report. It usually gets run in December or January, and we expect that report to be available to the LEAs via the data gateway in January. That's it for me.
All right, thank you. I am not sure if Colby is on. So I'm gonna skip over his item, and I will either email out any information that we have on the CRDC data collection, and also probably add it to our next month's agenda, unless anyone else has anything to say on this from USB. Okay, we'll go ahead and skip that one for now then. Okay, and now we have Malia with special education updates.
Okay, can you advance? Keep going. Okay, so my annual update on event dropout. So we worked hard all September, August, September to track down students who are showing up as special ed event dropout and get that updated as much as possible. And as usual, it makes a huge difference. We got that number down by almost 1,000 from what it was when I looked at it in mid-September to when it was after the October deadline. And that number would actually be even bigger if I had used what I initially saw in early September. So it's a huge work. Thank you so much for everything you do on that, and keep that up.
Hey, Malia, you're coming across a little bit muffled.
Okay, let me try not using this headphone.
Thanks.
Okay, is that better?
Much.
My hair stuck in it though. Usually those headphones are more clear than without, so that's why I use them. But okay, so 1 second. Okay, so and I just wanted to give a shout out. So in the process of reviewing event dropout data and cohort data, a few LEAs brought an item to our attention that turned out to be an issue with the S1X records, just how it was showing up in UTREX reports. The S1X records in our USB data warehouse have always worked as expected. There's just this really weird little situation going on in UTREX reports. 3 students statewide out of almost 13,000 S1X records. For us to find that, it would be like finding a needle in a haystack. But for the LEA, it could be maybe they just had 3 S1X records and it impacted one of those 3. It's a lot easier for LEAs to find issues a lot of the time. And so LEA attention to detail and identification of issues really is critical for improving system functionality and data quality statewide. So it's very much appreciated when you bring those items to our attention. Please don't ever hesitate to contact us with questions and concerns about things you're seeing. Okay, so the next subject I'm going to continue is kind of the interplay of some graduation rules and how that works with continuing enrollment eligibility. So first of all, from Board Rule 419, the part of it about eligibility to keep student in membership. It says that to generate membership for funding through the minimum school program on any school day, an LEA shall ensure that a student being counted by the LEA in membership has not previously earned a basic high school diploma or certificate of completion. So in other words, the codes, the high school completion status codes GC, GM, GQ, GR, and CT, those are permanent exit codes. And then next in board rule R277705, which is the board rule about graduation and certificate of diplomas and certificates of completion. An LEA may not enroll a student with the intent to award diploma or a certificate of completion once the student has earned a high school equivalence. So high school equivalence is the GED. So that's your GG high school completion status code. And that's why that's also a permanent exit code. Okay, and then looking at the special education rules. So in the section there about graduation, it says that the obligation of the LEA to make FAPE means free appropriate public education, available to all students with disabilities, does not apply to students with disabilities who have graduated from high school with a regular high school diploma. And the term regular high school diploma does not include an alternative degree that is not fully aligned with the state's academic standards, such as a certificate or a GED. So basically, that's where with the permanent exit validation, the CT code and the GG code aren't permanent exit codes for students with disabilities because of this piece in the special education rules. The special education students can still return to school even if they've earned the certificate of completion or a GED. Okay, and then I just wanted to also bring up a little bit more from this section of the special education rules, and I'll loop back to why I'm bringing this up in just a sec. So B there under that section says the LEA may not withhold a regular high school diploma from a student who has met state or LEA graduation requirements. And C says that graduation from high school with a regular high school diploma constitutes a change in placement requiring prior written notice that must contain all the requirements in these SPED rules. 4D, that's the I forgot what that section is called. That's I'll see if I can remember it, including being given a reasonable time before the LEA proposed to terminate the student's eligibility under the IDEA by issuing the student a diploma. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, and then finally, going back to Board Rule R277705, it says, this is the part about the alternate diploma. Notwithstanding the award of an alternate diploma, an LEA may still be obligated to provide FAPE to an eligible student in accordance with the IDEA. So this is why the GA code is not a permanent exit code for students with an IEP. I'm going to jump to the comments real quick. Okay, I have a question regarding SPED students and the new 30-day rule. Okay, I'm going to come back to this since that's about a kind of related but different subject. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, so in sum, this is what the permanent exit validation does. If a student has one of these codes in the prior year, actually it looks back as much as 5 years, their enrollment record is going to get blocked from UTREX. And it's slightly different if the student has an IEP versus if the student doesn't have an IEP. The exit code of a student that says the student died, the high school completion status code that a student aged out. Those are for every student. If they have that code, they're not eligible to enroll. And then the 4 codes that are for a regular high school diploma, anyone who has those codes, they're going to get blocked. And then the certificate of completion and the GED, the only students who will be blocked are the ones who don't have an IEP. And then the GA code isn't included in this validation because it's not a permanent exit code for students with an IEP. And for other students, they're not eligible for the code. Okay, so I'm covering this because there's a couple things going on that are causes for concern. So if a school frequently has students coded as graduates, but then changes them to codes that allow the student to return to school the next year, it might raise a red flag. So first of all, the question is the school allowing students to enroll even though they've earned a regular diploma? Next slide, please. The second cause for concern. Does the school need to improve its transition planning for students with disabilities? So IEP teams should be informed and read the graduation guidelines for students with disabilities and be transparent with the students and their parents. And I'm going to have links to the graduation guidelines later in the presentation. And then the students' completion plans should be clearly outlined in the transition plan. Will they be working toward a regular diploma? And if so, by when? Will they work toward an alternative degree or the alternate diploma? Again, by when? And or otherwise, will they be continuing to enroll until they age out? So this is all to say that there really shouldn't be any surprises, right? Going back to that slide that talks about that graduation is a change of placement. It's basically like, since it requires the prior written notice, parents, the student, everyone should be really clear. If a student's planning to graduate at the end of the school year, everyone should be really clear on it that they're going to graduate, and then that means they're not going to be able to return to school. And if they meet the requirements to graduate, you can't hold off on giving them the diploma in order to allow them to return to school for a few more years. When they graduate, that's it. They graduated, they're not eligible to re-enroll. There shouldn't be any surprises where a student graduates and then they come back the next year and say, well, I changed my mind. Now I want to continue to enroll in school. Next slide, please. And then, of course, the third cause for concern, historical updates. We know they're time consuming. It's a lot of work, and there's always the risk that they won't get done in time. This could result in incorrect data for graduation and dropout rates, for the October 1 enrollment data, and for the MSP funding data. Okay, so one thing that might be going on is it's a SIS system thing. Some SIS systems require you to have the exit dates and exit codes pre-populated. And so it makes sense to pre-populate most of your 12th graders as graduates. The majority of them, statistically speaking, are going to be graduates. Although for students whose IEP outlines a different transition plan, maybe it's best to pre-populate a code for these students that's in line with the plan, rather than having them coded as graduates, and then you have to go in the next year and send in a bunch of historical update requests to get that changed to retain senior or whatever it should be that would allow them to return to school the next year. In any case, since not all students complete the year as expected, this system functionality results in an increased need to carefully review exit and completion codes at year end. Okay, and then these are the resources, including so this first link, that website, you'll find a link for the special education rules, the graduation guidelines for students with disabilities, and then there's this really nice tool, a transition app that the student and their parents can use to explore some of their transition options, and then they can use that in the IEP meeting when they're coming up with the transition plan. And then another resource is this Padlet on transition. Includes a bunch of trainings, webinars, all kinds of links. It's got a lot of information, and that is Lavinia who put that together. You can always contact her directly with additional questions, and then if you have data questions about it, contact me. Okay, and then my last topic to go over today is the ESSA alternate assessment 1% threshold. I go over this every year just to warn you, it's coming up. This year, I also have a change to let you know about. So starting in school year 2018, ESSA came out with this 1% cap requirements, and so the state has a 1% cap on the percentage of students who are tested with an alternate assessment. And that calculation is based on data submitted in EdFacts files. And EdFacts has its own set of rules. So EdFacts data isn't always going to match other data sets. Prior to school year 2023, the EdFacts data included grades 3 through 8 and 10 for math and language arts, and grades 4 through 8 and 10 for science. Starting with the 2023 assessment data, 9th grade is going to be included in those files as well. So the calculations now are based on grades 3 through 10 for math and language arts, grades 4 through 10 for science. Okay, so the regulations put a cap for the state on we can only have 1% of students tested with an alternate assessment, but the state is not allowed to put a cap on LEAs. What we do have to do though is if an LEA tests over 1%, we notify that LEA, and that LEA is required to submit a justification letter to USBE. And those notifications, actually, I don't think they've been sent yet, but they will be getting sent soon to your special ed director. If your LEA exceeds the 1% amount on any of the 3 subject areas. And the justification letter due date is going to be sometime in January, although we don't have the exact date yet. And in that justification letter, the current year alternate assessment projections should be included. So that's where you as the data managers come in. Next slide, please. Okay, so a team of USB specialists reviews each LEA's justification letters in conjunction with the December 1 child count data. And a third of LEAs who exceed the 1% participation will be monitored. And USB may select specific schools and students to be monitored. Eligibility documentation and IEPs will need to be uploaded to UPIP's document storage at the time of monitoring notification. And some of the monitoring will be on-site. Okay, so what it means for you is you'll hopefully the special ed director will reach out to you right away when they get that letter to start collecting and analyzing the data that's going to be needed to write a robust justification letter and do root cause analyses. And at least one of the things you'll want to make sure that you have in that justification letter is that projected current year alternate assessment rates for each subject area. And then you'll want to help them collect and submit any required documentation to UPIPs. Okay, so the alternate assessment calculation for you to do that projected calculation. So you're going to do it separately for each subject area. And so then you'll do grades 3 through 10 for math and language arts, grades 4 through 10 for science. The numerator is going to be all students that you expect to be tested with an alternate assessment. And the denominator is going to be all students who you expect to take a test. So that means if you already know which students have opt-out forms, you leave those students out of the denominator. They're probably not going to end up taking a test, right? And then also first year English learner students are excluded from the language arts denominator, but you still include them in the math and science denominator. Okay, and then just to show you what we're working with for the state alternate assessment rates at this point, and this is what it's looked like over time. You can see in, so 2017 was the first year that we had to go through this whole process of justification letters and everything, but we didn't know about it beforehand in 2017, and we started training on it. And that training had an immediate impact. You can see in 2018, we were below 1%. We've remained below 1% every year since then, but unfortunately, we are creeping back up and we are dangerously close to 1% this year. And also just FYI, adding in 9th graders this year compared to if we hadn't added in 9th graders this year, we would actually have higher rates this year without the 9th graders than we do with the 9th graders. Okay, and then The number of LEAs that were over 1% in one or more subject area in 2023 is 42 LEAs, and that number, other than 2019, has kind of remained fairly consistent across the years, although the LEA, the specific LEAs change from year to year. Okay, and then here's some resources that you might find helpful. And for questions about alternate assessments, you can reach out to Tracy Gooley. And then for data questions about reporting the 1% data, you'll reach out to me.
Okay, thanks, Malia. Did you want to answer Michael's question now or just get back to it later?
Oh, wow, look at that. Oh, thank you so much, Michael. This is one of those ones. Oh, thank you for bringing that to my attention. I will get a ticket in to get that fixed ASAP because we're going to need to adjust that. Thank you. That's just, he found that there's a problem where one of the validation rules doesn't play nicely with this change in what is allowed as far as reporting membership days. So we'll have to fix that validation to play nicely with this change in what's allowed. So don't do anything on your end. The validation will go away when we get that fixed.
All right, thank you. And unless there's any other questions regarding special ed updates, we can go to the next item, which is graduation. So feel free to put questions in the chat if you have them. So myself and David are the ones who take care of the running the graduation rate. So David's going to be giving some announcements about when we will run the final 2023 cohort rate. So David?
Okay. Just to let you know, the cohort rate for 2023 hasn't been run yet. We're still waiting on a couple of updates, historical updates that needed to be run. And it should be done by next week. At that point, we'll run the graduation rate again. Be sure to be checking, so if you need to do historical updates, or make sure to send it in at least 2 weeks prior to the submission deadline when possible. In October, this is especially important as we get a lot of historical update requests related to graduation, and also review if the historical update requests can be something that can be submitted through an S1X update instead. It will make it easier for you and for us to be able to get it done. Next slide. So once we've run the graduation scripts again and audited everything, we'll update the graduation rate preview report on the gateway and also send out the files that we've sent out previously. We're aiming to get it done by this next month. And then the final graduation rate will be published in December. We'll also update the dashboard at that time once everything is published. So that's all I have.
All right, thanks, David. Is there any questions related to the 2023 cohort grad rate? If there's not any right now, you can always email myself or David, but do expect that we'll be getting that data out to you by next month. So it's not run yet, and I know we've had people asking. Okay, I have the next item, which is basically just an announcement of dates, mostly to get you thinking about the next UTREX finalized submission, and so you can plan accordingly, as you might have vacations or holidays. We do just need to make sure that every LEA is aware of the deadlines. So the finalized deadline for the December 1 UTREX submission is on a Thursday this school year. It's the December 7th, and 5 p.m. as always is the deadline time on that day. As David just mentioned, the deadline for historical updates is always 2 weeks prior to the submission deadline for a guaranteed completion. And so this year, if you need historical updates in your finalized December submission, those need to be submitted before Thursday, November 23rd. We will train on important data items that you should be reviewing for the December 1 submission at our next LEA data meeting, which, because of Thanksgiving this year, will be on November 16th. It'll still be a Thursday at this same time, but it'll just be a little bit earlier. And then we will plan to start doing courtesy data reviews following that meeting. So between Friday, November 17th, and then we hope to get them done prior to Thanksgiving, so that Wednesday, if we do have lingering ones that we haven't finished, then we'll make sure to get those sent out as soon as possible after Thanksgiving. And then the finalizer window will be available starting on Friday, December 1st, through the deadline, which is the 7th. So those are the important dates. We will also send an email about the finalizer when that button is available, just to confirm to you that it is on. So please keep those dates in mind as we go into the next few months. And then our last item for the meeting today is Cliff. He'll be talking about feedback in general on UTREX submissions. So Cliff.
Thank you. Go ahead to the next slide. So if you've been in some of the previous meetings over the last few months, we've done a survey, and that's what I'm kind of stepping right back into, is some of the results from that survey and trying to, share a little bit of what we've been working on, what we currently have prioritized, and welcoming any feedback that you guys have as we go through what we're looking for our opportunities are and looking to implement. Some of which are going to be things which are going to need not just the state to be able to make changes, but also for the LEAs to collaborate with us and take advantage of some of these things that we're implementing. The first one is that you had requested to be able to get the rollover sooner than August 1st. We've heard this one, and we're trying to get that. We actually came really close this last year to being able to implement that a week earlier, which would be along the lines of what we have right there for potentially being able to do the UTREX specific rollover as of July 22nd for this upcoming year. The complication that we ran into was a specific SIS that we were onboarding, and that they needed that extra time. So I don't predict that we're going to have any problems that will hold us back from being able to get that a week earlier. And again, that's just specifically for the UTREX database itself, which means that data will be able to get loaded into the system as of once we've finished that rollover, and we'd notify and let everybody know we're good to start taking collections into production. The next part, it's following along with that same suit, is that we're working on how we can offer test collections of the next year, and that we can potentially do that even sooner than UTREX is rolled over. So this is not indicating that we would be going to production with this data, but to where you could test it against the next year's manifest, as we call it, clearinghouse specification, as many of you know it as, and be able to find out if there's any changes in that year which are going to cause any complications. That isn't necessarily going to hit all the way through, potentially to validate, say, everything for you. You know, we're still looking to make sure whether or not we can do that or not. If we can say that it's going to validate against each SSID and things like that, it's in our goals to be able to offer that still with the July 15th. So that's 2 weeks earlier than I'm aware of that we've done that before in the past. With the committed to date being that August 1st, and you know, sometimes in years past that wasn't even met, of meeting August 1st. So a behavior that I've noticed with a lot of districts is not actually sending their data until their first day of school. And that's where this is coming to an ask from all of you, is to also be involved in sending us that data as early as possible. Not waiting until your first day of school, validating that it goes through. Even if you do not do a submit, if for some reason you don't want it to go into production, you can still start your collections with collect and validate. And we can go over that with anybody that needs any training for that. But it's a completely viable option for you to find out very early on. If, for instance, you have any students that may not have an SSID or any other complications in their data, we can start testing those early. And our goal with that is also to help address some of the issues that we've had this last year with getting all of our assessment data out. This will help us clean up any data issues and make sure that there isn't anything on the LEA's side that's preventing that. And at the same time, we're going to be making sure that there isn't anything on our side which is also causing complications, to be able to get that assessment data out as soon as possible and making that available for them. With this predicted time frame, I will be clear that we probably won't be ready to be able to send the assessment data till it gets into production for this year. We will be able to test with you, with the LEAs, and get that data validated at that level, but not necessarily then pass that the next level through, for instance, between July 15th and July 22nd to the vendors themselves. We'll probably still have to wait till at least July 22nd to get it into production, to be able to produce out that report, and to be able to use the tools which we have currently in place to send to those vendors. I am hoping for, if there's any feedback anybody wants, or if anybody wants to jump in on anything, this is, for me, an open communication presentation. So if anybody wants to speak, feel free to jump off of hold, bring your hand up. Happy to hear from anyone. But if I do miss seeing a hand up, Felicity, if you can jump in and let me know. Otherwise, I'll just kind of keep going and assume that you guys are liking what you're hearing, and that it's actually, sorry, there's still one more on the last slide. The communication of changes to collection validations. So with this, I think I mostly cover that, but just to be clear, that we think that we're going to be addressing a lot of this with the discussion for test collections. And by doing that, initially, we're going to be able to say we can put that test collection out there for you early. So not just at the end of the year, but potentially the same test collection process. We can run all of our new collections that are coming up through the same methodology, to where we can tell everyone we've got a block of validation manifest changes which are coming up. Please go out and start testing against it, and be able to direct you to send those collections to this test collection, which could be our next manifest, our next clearinghouse specification set of updates. And that will give you an early check to see if there's going to be any problems, give us fast feedback to be able to start addressing them. And our hopes are that that also helps cover what was being asked for with that communication of the collection validation changes, that you'll kind of have the opportunity not just to hear about them early, which we do in these meetings already, but to be able to start testing against them early before it hits production. Go ahead to the next slide. Still along the same lines, we've also got issue that was brought up for the data gateway uptime and trying to resolve data gateway errors. The two things that we've been focusing on for this are working on the data gateway active sessions dropping at around 12 to 15 minutes, regardless of activity. And we understand the complications with that, and we are actively working on that. That's something that we are predicting and expecting to be able to have resolved before December 1st. The next one we've got is working on the test scores by teacher timeouts. There's a lot of you that are experiencing this and feeling the pains of not being able to get those test scores. We are making good progress on this solution, and we do expect to have this solution out for sure before December 1st, but our hopes are potentially next week that we should be able to, well, we're hoping to have this out by that time. And also feel free to reach out if you are trying to check in on any of these items that I'm talking about. I'm completely happy with giving any updates for anyone via email or even a fresh service ticket, just asking kind of where each of these are at. I'm happy to help you out with that. Then we've got want detection and notification of failures from multiple records when only one is appropriate. We have seen this as coming through potentially with more than one different field area, but the one that we're focusing on right now and hope to be able to get a validation for, again, before December 1st, is going to be the multiple addresses. Again, it's going to get a little technical for just a second. It kind of comes from how the SIF data gets organized when essentially it's got two results when we expect one. That kind of open-ended thing can happen across the board, but we're starting with trying to get that detection for the multiple addresses. And when this has happened, it can stop the entire data collection. So this will make a big impact for those who are affected, and make sure that those go through. We'll get that feedback for you, and it will be less intensive on our side as well too, because presently, again, it takes a developer to bring that information back, help you get it fixed. Our aim is to be able to bring this back through a validation to where you can know that information automatically as you do your collections. Go ahead to the next slide. All right. And I'm also not trying to just sugarcoat and show you the stuff that we are making progress on and ignore anything else. This slide and the next slide are kind of going over other items which were discussed, which we still see that there's opportunities for us on, and we're welcoming any feedback for, again, prioritization on coming in and addressing some of these other areas that we don't have directly, as these are our hot points. So the first is that we were asked to get detailed error descriptions for every error. Again, that's going to take us a little bit of time, but it's definitely something we agree with and think has a good value to it. So again, feel free to up pitch any of these in the chat or reach out and let me know if these are particularly problem makers for you and your LEAs, and you feel would have a high impact if we were to address those earlier than some of the others. And we've got the assessment vendors not getting the student rosters. again, that one's a little bit generalized, and we definitely felt the pains of that this last beginning of the year. And we are planning to work ahead on that, keep up with that, and also trying to keep up with it by helping everyone, by having all the LEAs help us with getting the good data in earlier, to where our focus can be more so if there are any vendor issues, that we can have that time directly to work with it and be a little bit more focused. So we do feel that the other effects are going to help with this one a little bit, but there are still some opportunities there where we can target that. All right, so the last one is most important because students are not getting rostered, and that and it is not their data that is wrong. So yeah, I 100% agree that as a state, we're willing to identify when there's a connection issue or something as a problem on our side, and make sure that that's something that we're addressing and trying to communicate transparently to where we get those issues fixed. And again, our current plan on that is, other than the fixes that we found this year, which are fixes which shouldn't reoccur, that we do plan to make more time. And there's other internal changes which we've discussed, and processes where we've implemented, which should also reduce the risk of us not having as much time to directly focus on anything that happens at that beginning of the year. We're actually going to be doing code freeze for new features, which will slow things down to where our development team is available and more accessible for addressing anything that comes up and able to swarm on those issues. So we should have a much better next beginning of year due to those changes. Then we have an exact, oh, sorry, there's still a few more on that last one. Have an exact list of which warnings turn to failures and when. I think that that's something that we're looking to potentially work on from the clearinghouse specification, to add a little bit more sort of expectations on that. And if there's other ways that you feel that you'd like to make sure that we address that with, please let us know. But I believe that that's what we've internally discussed so far as a potential there, is by, bringing out a little bit more expectation dates, potentially utilizing what we had mentioned before of having the manifests sort of scheduled and saying, here's the scheduled release for these manifest changes. You can test against them, and here's where they'll go to production. A lot of these things should kind of fall into play with each other and make some good benefits for everybody. The students not loaded or rostered due to errors of non-related student fields. We're still working on that feedback, and there's been some great feedback on it. But we haven't implemented how or discussed putting anything into play that would actually create the fix for this, which so far, I believe the feedback that we've had so far was to potentially have it a little more fluid, to where during the beginning of the year, things which are currently just marked as a flat required across the board for the year could be marked down to a warning during certain times, during the beginning of the year, middle of the year, and then when it actually is critical, then it gets turned over to a fatal during the other times a year. There's a little bit of risk here with that it could go against, kind of the request earlier of, it may add confusion to people saying, well, that was just a warning before, now it's a fatal. So we're also trying to consider that aspect as well too, to make sure that if we do make such a change, then it's just very clearly indicated for you, and it doesn't risk the misunderstandings that it might cause to have a dynamically changing system like that. So probably just trying to build it through business rules that say, during these periods, this is required, during these other periods, it's not. Again, if you have any particular feedback that you want to share on that, or suggestions, by all means, keep sending them to us. Go to the next slide. All right, so then we have what changes and actions by USB could be considered to give our students the best experience. So here's a few more of the areas which were given to us for suggestions. We've got test more changes with LEAs before releasing them. We're hoping that that manifest change is going to take part in that. We're open to hear particulars of what other sort of testing you would like to see us doing with particular LEAs. Then we've got define a smaller set of minimum fields required to allow loading or rostering or shift some errors to be warnings until mid-September. I kind of just touched based on that one that we are considering how to do that. And we've got collect and send LEA data before school starts so that testing with assessment vendors also begins before school starts. I feel I've also touched on that one as well too. Improve higher education connection for transcript data. I haven't really hit on that one yet, but I do know that that for sure is going to be something that we're going to want to put a focus in on at some point in this year to get our higher education connections more reliable and hitting those needs. So if, again, you have particulars on that, feel free to continue to communicate with me on that. And if you have any particular suggestions, make sure that's included. Be more transparent with business rules and code used for validation. We do have the clearinghouse specification where we do try to keep all that directly there. I'm open for some feedback of the platform you would like to see that come through on. If you would like something such as like an Excel document that instead of it being a text document that, you know, went through and said, here's all of our business rules, here's all of our validations, they could be searched or filtered. If anybody has any particular suggestions on the format that you'd like to see those business rules. I do know we also have the earlier suggestion of just getting a more detailed responses for each and every one. That we can also consider incorporating those two together. But currently my leaning on this so far has been to potentially make it searchable for you, something that's like in a spreadsheet like Excel, where you could target them or search them instead of just the text documents. And that definitely feels like that's something that we could address once we know for sure that it's what's being asked for. And then the last one, the thing that we all hope for is just improved reliability over all of our related applications. We do understand how everything is tied together and how one thing can cascade into another and cause complications. So I'm not sure if we'll have a direct output to be able to say that this is going to ensure reliability across everything. But I do think that the code freeze part that I had mentioned is going to help slow down some of those changes and hopefully affect some of that stability during those critical times for us, to where we can make sure that things are more reliable because we're only changing what has to be changed during that at least beginning of year. Does anybody have anything that they would like to bring up for feedback? Any other areas that maybe I didn't cover? I believe this was the last slide that I had. All right, well, I'm excited to get a lot of these fixes in place and to see the benefits that come from them. If anybody has anything, continue to reach out. I'll hand back to you, Calista. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Well, we'll ask if there's any last questions from LEAs. And if not, we can go ahead and end. And again, we'll have our next month's meeting on the 16th, which is a little bit earlier than usual, and we'll email out the agenda beforehand. Okay, well, thanks everyone for attending, and we will see you next month. And feel free to continue sending us questions as you have them. Thank you.